Storytelling has basically been a part of hip-hop since its inception. Look at classic tracks like Murder Was the Case by Snoop Dogg or I Got a Story to Tell by Biggie, for example. Hip-hop excels and thrives when there's a story being told. Rappers use their lyrics and the production to tell tales. Sometimes they're exaggerated a bit, but other times they're based purely in reality. Not everything is all sunshine and rainbows in the inner city. Here's 11 of the saddest tales in the genre. Be warned, these songs do cover some pretty morbid topics, so be prepared to have some tissues handy when you listen to them. The rules are pretty simple. 1 song per artist. Also, this isn't for generally sad songs in hip-hop, but specifically ones that have some sense of a story being told. So songs like The Crossroads by Bone Thugs and Harmony, for example, wouldn't apply for this list. Number 11. The Artist's Storytelling, Part 1. From Outkast's third album, Aquemini, the duo uses their respective verses on the song to tell a story about certain women in their life. In the case of Big Boy, it's a woman nicknamed Susie Screw because she screws a lot. A pretty open lady to say the least, who he wants to get a chance to experience, if you catch my drift. The song turns a bit darker though for Andre 3000's verse, as the woman he raps about is a friend of Susie's nicknamed Sasha Thumper, who he knew growing up. He asks her one day what she wants to be when she grows up, and she simply responds with, alive. A harsh reality for some that are stuck in an unhealthy cycle and unable to see a way through it. Andre continues on through his career and comes back to town to see Sasha, but finds out that she has a boyfriend, but hopes still that he'll see her one day at one of his shows. However, that never happens, as he finds out that she was found dead with a needle in her arm and pregnant. A sad explanation of why she responded that way to Andre earlier in his verse. Number 10. Intruder Alert. From Lupe Fiasco's second album, The Cool, he tells a story in each verse about intruders. The first being a woman who was raped when she was younger and has a hard time trusting men now. The second being about a homeless man with a drug addiction and the inner demons he faces due to it. The third being a man trying to get his daughter across the border to give her a better life and hoping the border patrol doesn't catch and deport her as she's an immigrant, or from their perspective, an intruder, as the song says. Sarah Green on the bridge depicts a vivid picture of building up your mental fortitude but still being unable to keep out their own personal conflict or intruder, as the title states. Number 9. Children's Story. From Slick Rick's classic debut album, The Great Adventures of Slick Rick, Children's Story tells the cautionary tale of a youth growing up in the hood who is given the idea of robbing from another boy, so they start robbing people together. But then one of them continues along the path of robbing and stealing and tries to rob a detective, which turns the story even worse as things turn into a shootout, stealing a car, and even holding a pregnant woman at gunpoint. The story then ends with him surrendering to the police and still being shot by them despite putting down his gun. The lines, "The cop shot the kid, I still hear him scream," sends chills down the spines of listeners. A harsh story of what a life of crime can do to you, while also being a look at police brutality and prejudice that we as black men face on a regular basis. Number 8. RENEE. From the Lost Boys' debut album, Legal Drug Money, RENEE is a hood love story with Mr. Cheeks telling us about the woman from the title, beginning with how they met and started talking and became closer and intimate. A real good relationship, but however, as it often happens, a problem has to occur. You might think that it was some kind of argument perhaps, but no. Shortly after stating that he's never been in love before, he gets a message he believes to be from RENEE, but it's instead her mother telling him that she's been shot. He rushes to the hospital, but by the time he gets there, she's already gone. The video version of the song goes even deeper into this, as at the end he confronts the man who shot her and is going to shoot him, but ultimately decides to let him go, likely because he won't bring her back. Number 7. Runaway Love. From Ludacris's 6th album, Release Therapy, Luda tells the story of 3 different young girls that deal with various problems in their life and decide to run away from home. The first girl has never met her father and has a mother that's a drug addict who gets with a man who winds up assaulting her, and her mother not believing her when she tells her. The second girl has an abusive stepfather and she makes a friend who she can trust, but the friend winds up getting shot and killed during a drive-by gone wrong, leading her to again have no one to confide in and wanting to escape. The third girl is on drugs and having sex with a guy who's years older than her, and she winds up pregnant, but he's not ready to be a father yet, so he bails out on her. The verses paint pictures of the pain that these young girls are prone to being exposed to without proper guidance from parents or other relatives. Mary J. Blige in the chorus brings the whole song together beautifully and deepens the emotions felt when listening and imagining the tragic lives of these 3 young girls. Number 6. Uncommon Valor, a Vietnam story. From the 5th album of Jedi Mind Tricks, Servants in Heaven, Kings in Hell, Vinnie Paz speaks from the perspective of a reluctant soldier in Vietnam who has essentially seen the horrors of war and wants nothing more to do with it. R.A. the Rugged Man is featured on this song and spits one of the best verses ever, some would say, myself included. He speaks from the perspective of his father, who is a Vietnam vet, about how he felt during the war. The story sounds a lot more positive at first as he handles the war relatively calmly compared to the man from Vinnie's verse, but in a twist at the end, he escapes the war but has some drastic after effects from it. Agent Orange, one of the chemicals used during the war in Vietnam, caused his children to have birth defects, as R.A. states that his siblings had multiple health issues at birth and his brother had died. Once again, a tragic ending with the added effect of it being based on a true story. Number 5. Brenda's Got a Baby. From Tupac's debut album, Tupacalypse Now, a track that tells the story of a young lady in the hood who has a boyfriend who is apparently also her cousin and gets pregnant, and her family doesn't seem to be very interested in her life. To make matters worse, she's only 12 years old and the child's father leaves her to have the baby herself, so she turns to prostitution in order to provide for her and her baby, which ultimately winds up in her being killed. Truly one of the original tragic tales in hip-hop storytelling, especially telling the story of a young girl in the hood. Number 4. Last Good Sleep. From Company Flow's debut album, Fun Crusher Plus, this track is one that has LP telling the story of his mother's abuse at the hands of his stepfather, setting up the picture with his father leaving her to be a single mother and her finding love in a new man, but things going downhill from there, with him starting to beat her in a drunken rage. Throughout the song, he mentions multiple times how he's trying to sleep to escape from having to see and hear the violent beatings his mother endured, as well as questioning himself if standing by and doing nothing was the best thing to do as a child, or if he could have helped her. Backed by some eerie sounding production, this track is one that once again is another very realistic look at how dealing with domestic abuse as a child is all too painful. Number 3. I Seen a Man Die. From Scarface's 3rd album, The Diary, Scarface tells the story of a man who comes home from jail and wants to change his life around, but he quickly devolves into killing a man for the first time and seeing the pain that can come from ending another person's life. Scarface ends every verse with a variation of seeing a man cry once you've seen a man die. But in the 3rd verse, he specifies, I never seen a man cry till I seen that man die, possibly inferring that the man who did the initial killing cried after committing the murder and realizing what he's done, but now is crying because it's his own turn to die. Either way you look at it, this song is a classic and somber look at the cycle of murder that many people in that lifestyle deal with. Number 2. You Never Know. From Immortal Technique's 2nd album, Revolutionary Volume 2, Technique tells a story about a woman who he knew who he is quite good friends with. She essentially rebuffs him when he tells her about how he feels about her though, and he goes on with his life like school and prison. But when he gets out, he keeps thinking about her, so he goes to the building she lived in and finds a letter there waiting for him. The letter tells him about how she had gotten HIV from a blood transfusion, and that's why she never had sex with him despite her wanting to. A tragic ending to a beautiful relationship, but what adds another layer of sadness to it is the fact that Technique has stated in an interview that the song is based off of various relationships that he's had and was basically compiled into a single story. Now, before we get into the last song on this list, remember to click that like button on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Number 1. One Life. From The Last Emperor's 3rd album, Music, Magic, and Myth, The Last Emperor raps a verse about his friend dying, then questioning what happens afterwards and what religion is right in this regard, making references to Catholicism, Buddhism, and speaking of nirvana, paradise, and hell, generally questioning this life that we are given before ending his verse with a reference to the featured rapper on this track, Too Poetic. In Too Poetic's verse, He tells a story about being stuck on the floor in pain, which has been worsening, and going to the ER and getting diagnosed with terminal cancer. He ends the song with the chilling lines, "Staying healthy comes first. Look at me, things could be worse." Sadly, not long after this verse was recorded, he succumbed to the disease. He was initially given a 3-month prognosis, as he mentions in the verse, but he survived for over 2 years. Truly another tragic tale in hip-hop. Now that was 11 of the most depressing stories in hip-hop songs. What songs would be on your list? What would you like to see next? Leave a comment in the comment section below, and as always, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video.